Welcome to the Behavioral Sciences section of our Practice MCAT questions. In this video, we're going to be going through questions 51 to 55. So first, I'll show you guys the questions so that you can pause the video and attempt them on your own. Here's question 51, 52, 53, 54, and 55. Now let's go through the questions together. In question 51, we're asked which of the following would be the best example of top-down processing. So top-down processing, and we want the best example. So top-down processing is when you look at something and you look at it as a whole and then have some interpretation of it so you can figure out what is the thing that I'm censoring, what is my sensory input, what's my interpretation of that. Whereas bottom-up processing looks at the pieces of something and then builds a complete picture from the whole. So from the ground up versus top down, you can think of coming from your brain. So we're looking for top down. Option A is saying a diver comes across a series of boards on the seafloor. As they examine the pieces, they realize they've stumbled upon a shipwreck. But this is bottom up because they're examining pieces, and then once they look at the small pieces, then they combine it together, get a whole, and then realize, wow, they have stumbled upon a shipwreck. So that would be bottom up. So A is incorrect. Option B is saying a mother recognizes her child among a crowd by first hearing the child yell out to her, then by visual recognition. This is kind of a different phenomenon, and it also kind of falls under bottom up, getting the pieces and then fitting it together rather than top down. And it doesn't really fall under this whole category as well. It's talking about like different information, while we're talking about getting pieces of one kind of sensory input and then putting it together to tell what am I even looking at. Option C is saying in estimating the solution to a math problem, a student first makes a rough estimate about the answer, then completes each step of the calculation and confirms the original estimate. This isn't even related to processing sensory information, it's more of a reasoning tactic. So because of that, we can rule option C out. That leaves us with option D, which is saying a man walks into his home and finds his wife hugging another man. He's initially threatened, but then realizes the other man is his wife's brother. And this is the correct answer, because the man first sees the sensory input, which is wife hugging another man. That's the sensory input that you get. And then instead of breaking down the pieces and putting it together as a whole, no, the person gets a sensory input, then they have some cognitive, thinking about that, some thinking of like, what am I actually perceiving to get a result, which is that, initially they're threatened. That's the initial thing. But then when they have some thinking, some cognitive ability going on here, then they see that the man is the wife's brother. So the difference between option A and this is that it's not until the diver, got all the pieces together and built a whole that they realize that the whole thing they're looking at is a shipwreck. They didn't kind of think about it and then reason that out, So that's why it's different from bottom-up processing, but D is top-down processing. In question 52, it says participants enroll in a course aimed for adults who are learning to ride a bicycle for the first time. In this course, each individual is taught personally by an instructor while the others observe, and afterwards the individual is then asked to attempt riding the bicycle in the presence of the other participants. Based on the theory of social facilitation, blank, we can say that something is going to happen. So we are talking about social facilitation, and in this case we have a course. Adults are learning to ride a bicycle for the first time. And the key thing here is they attempt riding the bicycle in the presence of others. So when we're talking about social facilitation, it's saying that depending on the task that we're carrying out, the presence of an audience is going to either help us and facilitate us positively to make us to have our performance be even better, or negatively, impede us from having a good performance. It depends on the task. And what it depends on is if it's a task which the person is good at and has done a lot and they're comfortable with it, versus a more difficult task. And riding a bicycle, it depends on the person. If it's someone who's learned it, in their childhood and has been doing it for years, then later on it's just a routine task. It's completely normal. It's just natural. You just, turn the pedals and you're just going to keep going. Like once you learn it, you don't really unlearn it. It's just a natural thing which comes to you. If you're doing that in the presence of others, you're probably not going to mess up if you're comfortable in that situation. But because we're talking about learning it for the first time, anyone who's ridden a bike can remember the first time actually learning it is very difficult. So they are doing a difficult task, which are, actively trying to learn right now. So it's also in a kind of classroom environment, and they have the presence of an audience. That's going to impede their performance. So option A is incorrect, but B is correct, which is saying that they're going to perform worse, not better. And C is just saying that the participant emotional response to the individual will affect performance. Sure, this is technically correct, and we can also accept this as a correct answer as well, that is what social facilitation says, but we can have a better answer because social facilitation goes further and talks about if the task is something which the individual is comfortable with or not. And finally, option D, there will be no change in performance. That's incorrect. Question 53 is asking us which of the following is considered the deepest stage of sleep in the sleep cycle. So we're talking about the deepest stage of sleep cycle. So the order of the sleep cycle is what's shown here. It goes from stage 1 to 2 and then 3 and then REM sleep. But in terms of the deepest stage, REM sleep actually comes before stage 1. It's kind of in between stage 1 and awakening. And in terms of the deepest stage, that would be option C, stage 3. So 1 and 2 are more light sleep. Stage 3 is deep sleep. In question 54, it says, in studying the effects of poverty on the health outcomes of rural residents, which of the following could be used as a dependent variable? So we're studying something, it doesn't really matter what, but we're looking at the effects of poverty on health outcomes. What is going to be the dependent variable? So in a study, we can have an independent variable, which we manipulate, and then that later on leads to a dependent variable, which is the thing that we're actually trying to measure. And we're looking at something that relates to poverty, and this is the thing that we can change because we can change what we're looking at and focusing on at that given time, and then we see the effect that this has on health outcomes. So our dependent variable is going to be something that's a health outcome related thing. Option A is saying race. That doesn't really make sense. First of all, it's not a health outcome related thing. Second of all, it doesn't make sense as a dependent variable. So just think, can I manipulate, whatever I've chosen as my independent variable, and then will this lead to a change in what I'm saying is a dependent variable if you're trying to figure out what's your X and what's your Y? It doesn't make sense that you change one of these other factors, such as option C, sex. If you change sex, can you then have a change in the dependent variable being A, race? No, that doesn't make sense. So we eliminate A, and I can just tell you now, B is the correct answer. Average life expectancy, that is a health outcome. And we can say that, okay, if we look at race as our independent variable, just look at a given individual, say what their race is, see their health, see their life expectancy. Yes, that makes sense. Life expectancy can be a dependent variable. Look at another individual, different race. Do they have a different life expectancy? Yes, we can probably actually measure this, so that makes sense. And same thing with C and D, age and sex. They can be independent variables. It doesn't really make sense for them to be dependent variables. In question 55, it says Sarah has just moved to a noisy apartment in the city. Initially, the noise was irritating, but over time she got used to it. Which of the following best explains this phenomenon? So someone moved into a noisy apartment in the city. Initially, it was irritating. Over time, got used to it. So what best explains this? This is explaining habituation, which is when you have a sensation or some sensory input that's occurring the first time, you notice it because you're getting this input, your brain's trying to figure out what is this, especially if it's like a very loud noise, something that's irritating. But then later on, your brain sees that this is a constant that's happening, therefore it must not be something that you really need to pay attention to, not really that important, so your brain kind of just ignores it and focuses on other novel stimuli. The simplest example is when you put a shirt on in the morning, you feel it because you just got out of the shower and you weren't wearing a shirt before, but then afterwards your brain ignores it because it's not important to feel the shirt that you're wearing. There's so many other more important things. So that's an example of habituation. That's what's going on here. We're looking for that type of answer. Option A is saying she only remembers what she wants to remember, so she's forgetting about the noise. No, that doesn't really make sense. You can think about this from your own experience. Do you only remember what you want to remember and just forget things that you don't want to? No, people remember things that they would love to forget, but they can't. You can't just ignore noise which is happening all the time. It's not something that you can really actively work on, but over time your brain can naturally ignore it. So A doesn't really best explain this phenomenon. B is saying she's lived in the apartment so long her sense of hearing has been damaged. No, that's not likely it. From real life experience, you should be able to just, puzzle this out, that this is something that has happened to pretty much everyone that's listening to this, right? A noise which was coming and you noticed it first of all, then gradually, lessened or completely went away. It's not because your hearing was damaged. It's because of an actual adaptation which the brain has, which is that it cancels this noise out or stops paying attention to it, even though it still receives a signal. So it's not that her sense of hearing has been damaged. It wasn't that loud a noise. There's another explanation for this, which is an actual change in the brain. Option C is saying once a novelty of living in a new city wears off, everything is less annoying. No, this is just some crazy answer just thrown in there. No, that doesn't explain this phenomenon at all. And this is, like too specific to a new city. That's just the example that we're talking about. But this can happen for any given stimuli, which is noticeable at first and then eventually goes away. We're looking for a different answer. And D answers that. Our brain has become accustomed to the noise and no longer initiates as such a strong response. So it may not have kind of disappeared. It's more so that you got used to it, but it's just a thing in everyday life now. It's not something new to you and you're like, why is the city so loud all the time? You're just used to it. There's nothing you can do. You ignore it. You go about your life. Your brain doesn't have a strong response to it. And this is a phenomenon which, once again, like I said, naturally occurs. It's not something that this person actively paid attention to and tried to make happen. That's it for the questions in this video. If you enjoyed what you saw, make sure to check out our course. The link is right here, as well as in the description below. And also in the description, we have a link to a free trial of this course that you can take before deciding if you want the full course or not. In that course, we have question videos just like this, going through, all the options in the question to break down what the logic is behind each one, why it's correct or incorrect, so that you have the right type of thinking for the MCAT. And these are some of the features that we have in the course, including lecture videos by medical students. Here are some reviews for the course. And other than that, make sure to subscribe here for the videos that we post here. That's it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next.